All right. So this is, hold on. Awesome. All right. So yeah, welcome back to Talks with Trav, guys. Obviously, I am your host, Travis Diamond. Today, I have a special guest with me. He is someone who graduated with his degree in business finance from one of the top 5% of business schools worldwide, earning the honor society, the prestigious honor society of Beta Gamma Sigma, which is for the top 10% of graduates in that top 5% of business schools worldwide. He is also a contributing member of UWF, the University of West Florida's Lewis Maygarden Center for Financial Literacy, a securities license advisor, and he is also currently pursuing a dual designation for financial services, certified professional, and chartered financial consultant at the American College of Financial Services. That is a mouthful. I hope I didn't stumble over it too much. So yeah, I am here with Grant Murphy. Grant is someone that I've known for a couple of years now, and I've really watched him go on these very deep, thoughtful, for lack of a better term, tangents or rants about the financial world. And I've always found it intriguing, and I've learned a lot from you. So that's why I wanted to reach out to you and have you on here, because there's a lot of questions about finance that people don't understand and don't know, and they don't really have access to the good information. And I'm like, hey, I know an expert. Let me get the expert information. So yeah, thank you for taking the time out of your Saturday to chat with me a little bit. It's much appreciated.
The pleasure's mine, Travis, and I can't thank you enough for bringing me on, man. It's an honor.
Absolutely, for sure. Now, as we discussed before we got rolling, I did send you a list of some questions, but we both decided that it would be better to have an actual free flow conversation as opposed to an interview of question and answer. So with that being said, I mean, we can just kind of start with the relevant things in the world right now. One of the hot button topics is, inflation. Yeah. So, if you don't mind, just kind of tell me a little bit about the last couple of years, how that's impacted the financial world, and specifically like the last year or so when inflation's kind of skyrocketed.
Right. And so, as you alluded, I'm very long-winded. So let me try not to go back to the Great Depression or anything, but I will go back to the Great Recession of 2008, where all this kind of really seemed to have started, right? So, you have the housing collapse, right? And then you have this period of the quantitative easing program, which is merely a fancy word for the Federal Reserve buying the debt securities in the open market because nobody wants them. When interest rates are at zero, no one's buying debt securities because they're not making any money off them. And so by doing that, you're suppressing a lot of things, one of which is inflation. Okay. And so now that we've had COVID in the last 2 years, and things are starting to open back up, you have these issues with, they're having to raise interest rates, right? They're having to bring the world back out of this quantitative easing program, and they're having to stop spending money on the debt out there in the open market. And so, inflation, I think there's a misconception about, there's many misconceptions about inflation, actually. The methodology has changed about 20 times since 1980. Okay. And it's very malleable to the president or the administration that's in office to give a certain, there's the law of statistics is that you can literally change whatever narrative you want based off how you present the data. Right. And so that being said, I think the actual number for inflation using the 1980 methodology is 19.5%. Okay. So when we talk about an 8.9%, 8.5% inflation rate, that's a high number. But the main misconception is that we're talking about year over year, right? So we're talking about an 8.9% increase from this time last year, right? And when you think about this time last year, the world was in, shambles, or coming out of shambles at least. And so you don't have people out there spending as much money. There's not as much stimulus going on. Of course, the supply chains were backed up even back then. So inflation high, but you got to understand the business cycle, right? I mean, you have the growth, right? You have the peak, then you have the recession, then you have the trough. It's a natural cycle, and we haven't had one in so long that this is kind of a natural thing. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, that was a lot. So I truthfully, I didn't realize that it was the inflation rate was calculated year over year. So thank you for sharing that, because that explains a lot to me. I'm like, I've always wondered how it works. And I get like inflation's kind of based off of, to a degree, the amount of money that's being printed by the Fed and the amount of money in circulation and things like that. So that's very eye-opening, because I mean, again, and especially like when you look at, like you said, the past 2 years with COVID and everything, the world kind of pressed pause. So it makes sense that the inflation might be a little bit higher. And then let me ask you this, to what effect did the stimulus checks that were printed, like the $1,200 2 or 3 times, I don't remember how many times they passed it out, but
3 times, yeah.
yeah. So to what effect are we experiencing that right now?
Absolutely, man. I mean, the money supply itself that the Fed is in charge of controlling, they manipulate it to raise interest rates or lower interest rates to either get consumers to spend money or not spend money. I mean, I think most people have seen the chart. We've issued about 80% of all dollar bills in existence today have come in the last, 30, 40 years, but 40% of that number has come in the last 2 years. So that's huge to inflation,
Yeah, when I heard that, I was like, oh, that's rather scary.
It's shocking, right?
And while we're on the subject of the Fed, I'm a bit of a libertarian at heart, so
Sure.
I've been known to say abolish the Fed a time or two. But anyways, I've seen them talking about maybe they've already started the process of making their own crypto coin. But to me, it seems like the concept of crypto is decentralized, no regulation, right?
Yes.
And it contradicts everything the Fed stands for in that control and that regulation. So what do you think they're doing this for? Is it because they see the future of finance as cryptocurrency, or maybe there's a different reason to try to capture the market a little bit?
I think a cashless society is inevitable. I think cash is an inefficient way to because there's 3 functions of money, right? You have the store of account, right? You have of it, and you have the medium of exchange, right? So needless to say, we all use cards, right? Everything's electronic these days. So that was inevitable to begin with. Now, what I will say, and I remember reading deeply into this about a year ago, but they've got these central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, right? And they modeled it off the digital yuan that China was using, right? And so when you tell Americans what the digital yuan is, you just immediately think it could never work, right? Because the idea of the CBDC is that, 1, it can be traced and it's completely 100% traceable. 2, when there's a time that the Federal Reserve needs to increase spending, they can put an expiration date on the dollars in your bank account, right? It could go poof. In theory, right? Yeah. And so, you say that to an American, they're like, what? Because there's some people down here in the South that have cash in their house, right? They have tens of thousands of dollars in a safe. And for a guy like me, any dollar above your emergency savings is an inefficient use of the dollar if it's not invested in something earning a rate of return, so.
Right.
Anyways, I think the digital dollar, I think the CBDCs were inevitable. But what I will say is, crypto itself, right? You have so many different moving parts there. And I don't think people understood early on, at least the mass population, I don't think they understood the different use cases and the different types of coins that there are. Right. And so I don't want to get too grotesque here, but one of the most valuable cryptos, in my opinion, early on was this one actually called cum rockets, right? And so it's basically used for the porn industry for people to pay for webcam stars to do what they want them to do.
Okay.
So when you think of a crypto coin not having any intrinsic value, right? So the US dollar has intrinsic value in the fact that if I give you $1 for a bottle of water, the bottle of water is the intrinsic value. Right. For the longest time, a Bitcoin had no intrinsic value to it unless you were going to give me the cash for it, right? Which you have to, barter and trade. Sure. And so now you sit there and when you think about the cum rockets coin, right? That's a legit business model, right? In an industry that's not going away, for one, and by all accounts, it's booming, right? So for a guy like me, I'm like, that is a legit intrinsic value to that coin. And that made me realize, this a couple of years ago, but it made me realize, you're telling me, when you hear Ethereum, Bitcoin, I think a lot of people think they do the same thing. And they don't, right? So I say all that to say the Fed's not going away, and they're going to have as much control as they want. But it's inevitable that we go to some sort of digital coin.
Okay, I got you. So, I know there's tons of different cryptos out there. You just introduced me to a new one with cum rockets, so that's pretty funny.
I hate telling people about it, man, but yeah.
But it's a good example because it shows you in real time that it doesn't matter that if you don't have the intrinsic value, like you said, it doesn't matter what you say the value of the Bitcoin is, if it's valued at $60,000, but if the only value comes from me giving you actual cash for it, and then that value of the Bitcoin would go up and down based on the value of the dollar. So yeah, it makes sense. And I've seen, I think like Domino's, for example, accepts Bitcoin now, and there's businesses that are starting to accept different cryptos.
But that's what's changed the narrative, Travis, is that now that companies are accepting it, there's value to it, right?
Yeah,
But just 2 or 3
exactly.
years ago, no one was accepting it, right? So there was nothing you could do with it other than trade it for cash, you know?
Right. And I've always wondered, because I know I can't remember exactly when it was, somewhere in the 70s or 80s, when they got off the gold standard for the
I think so
dollar.
in the 70s, yeah.
Yeah. So I've always wondered, I'm like, why is this valuable? Why is this paper in my hand, this dollar in my hand valuable, outside of the fact that there's an understood agreement across the world that it holds value, you know?
Well, yeah, and you had the Bretton Woods Agreement and after World War II that, you know, they pegged, like, I can't remember what the percentage was, but let's say 75% of all US world currencies are pegged to the dollar, right? So
Yeah,
global trade is based off the value of the dollar, right? So,
right.
yeah,
It's like the global reserve or something like that, I
yeah,
believe they
absolutely.
refer to it as. And interestingly enough, I was listening to something, I think it was Ray Dalio,
Yeah, it
was
sure was.
talking about that. He just released something recently where he was talking about, for the first time since that agreement after World
Yeah,
War II, the US dollar's in danger of no longer being the universal reserve,
right.
which is, go ahead.
Well, it's alarming for one, especially for a
Yeah,
guy who's in finance. It's like, you know, if that happens, we lose a lot of our power in the world.
right.
You know, because when we control the supply of take semiconductors, for instance, they're produced in Taiwan. Well, who controls Taiwan? China. So we've limited ourselves to the ability to even build things here. That's why supply chains are so backed up, especially in the car industry. When we control the dollar, other countries are you know, waiting in line for us to give them what they need, kind of thing, you know?
Right.
Another thing, countries that have assets in dollars are held in our depository banks in America. So we can freeze their assets, like Russia's assets are frozen, right? And
Right.
so and I don't know if you saw this, but they just went back to pegging the ruble to gold.
Yeah, I did see that. And not to get all conspiratorial or anything, but the last country's
For it.
world leader that pegged their finances to gold was Gaddafi. And
Really? I
then
didn't know that.
yeah, and Saddam Hussein as well. He was trying to get that implemented. There seems to be, by no stretch of the imagination am I saying these are good people and they, they
Sure.
didn't deserve what happened, but I will say there is a string attached to these last several world leaders that we have kind of gone in and toppled their country, to them
Oh, yeah.
either having a gold standard or them attempting to remove a central bank or resisting a central banking system being implemented in their country.
Right.
Like it's incredibly interesting to me that there's been those connections that are apparent and no one wants to talk about them. Now, sure, Saddam was a murderer and a heinous person and all of that. Not saying he didn't deserve to be removed from power and things like that, but it's interesting that we're selective in the countries that we're going and doing things about. Because if you look at like the Saudis, for example, we don't do anything about the chaos that's going on in Saudi Arabia, or in, what's that other country? I can't remember. There's several countries that there's just like chaos going on in, and there's like mass genocide.
Venezuela's one, you
Do
know,
what?
Venezuela's one, right?
Yeah.
There's several things. And so I actually, you know, not to get off topic, but there was a post that a friend of mine on Facebook made today that said, you know, if it basically was relating America to being the villain of the world. Right. And so I wanted to comment. I didn't, because I've come to understand that you just can't argue with people on Facebook. It's just a waste of time.
Absolutely.
But when you think about countries like China and Russia and Iran and North Korea, we are not, by all accounts, right? I mean, we have our flaws like every other country, but there's some real evil out there in the world that is blatant, but also accepted by society because it's been around forever. You know, if you go back to biblical
Yeah.
times, man, you talk about, you know, people getting their fingers cut off for stealing and stuff like that. That's still a thing in, I think, Pakistan, you know, or Iran.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah. In Iran, there's an uptick of people transitioning their gender because it's punishable by death to be gay, but it's not for to be transgender, which is interesting
sounds
to
like a
say the
loophole.
least. But yeah, there's the loophole, which is weird. But and Yemen is the other country I was thinking of. There's
Oh, definitely.
chaos, the genocide in Yemen, but
Yep.
no one's talking about that, and that's been going on for over a decade.
Right.
But yeah, we are vilified, and you know what? To be fair, there are some examples where we have funded and provided resources to countries that have used them to ensure what's best for the American interest is met.
That's
But
true.
anyways, that's a different subject. We're here to talk about finances and things like that. So one of the things that I've been reading about a little bit is how, and it's really all over TikTok. That's all I'm seeing on TikTok, is that if you have to get all, instead of having your money attached to your personal name, having it in an LLC or a trust for tax loopholes and
Yep.
and to minimize legal risk. Like, can you break that down a little bit? Because that's something that I think a lot of people, especially again with the rise of TikTok, you see it all over the place, but no one does a good job of explaining it.
Yeah. So the idea, so I'll give you an example. I have a client of mine who owns, let's say, a lawn care company, right?
Sure.
And this lawn care company, let's say he has trucks, right? And he has the business, and the trucks are underneath the business, right? It's all under one LLC. Well, the problem is that if, you know, and this would never be a knock on anybody personally, but when you're out there driving all the time, and by the way, you're exposed to the Florida heat, you may or may not be making the best decisions driving or getting a little irritated. Let's say one of those trucks hits somebody and kills them. Well, now the whole business is up for liability, right? Now you can sue the entire business. So what we've suggested is that you take those trucks and you put them in a separate LLC, right? Now, the problem with that is that you're paying sales tax because you're going to have to lease those trucks back to the business, two different LLCs. But you're paying a small insurance policy through the sales tax from the pass-through entity, but you're separating your liability. So the same is true for rental properties, right? The same is true for companies that have multiple, you know, areas that they operate in. When I worked at the construction company, we basically we had three different companies, one of which would buy the land, the other one would develop it, and the other one would build on it. And they all sold each piece to each other, and it was just the best way that you could keep it separate without having any lawsuits overlap.
So is that like, are these all under one umbrella LLC? Or
No,
they're
separate.
totally separate, just the same people own them?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I got you. That makes sense. Because I have my LLC with my coaching business and everything. And the reason I have it is because, if I get sued, I don't want somebody to be able to sue me for everything I own. Like,
Take your house. Yeah,
you might get the business, but that is what it is. So essentially, it would be smart if I decide to go into any other avenues of income to start a new LLC.
I recommend
potentially.
it.
Yeah, and I know that's a general question, and it's hard unless you're given specifics.
Right. And of course, I guess I should go ahead and give the disclaimer, right? Nothing that I say today is going to be financial advice. Of course, I'd have to aggregate so much data to be able to give a recommendation, a prudent one at that. But nevertheless, there are general principles to financial planning, and that would be one of them, where it is a good idea to separate your entities, especially if they don't. I guess it's better to separate them if they are mutually exclusive in that, or not mutually exclusive, the opposite of mutually exclusive. They basically are two entities that work together, right? Because in that situation, you have overlapping liability. So yes, absolutely. Now, what I'm saying is with your podcast or with your coaching business and with everything else that you do, those don't really overlap, do they? I mean, maybe with the coaching, but I guess with the example of putting the trucks in different LLC and having the lawn care company LLC, those two things feed each other. Right. So it makes more sense to separate those than it would, other things.
Absolutely. And I was going to put in a disclaimer at the beginning that none of this is intended to be offered as financial advice. This is two people having a conversation. And I will also give the disclaimer that I am by no way, shape, or form a financial advisor or professional. So this is all just opinions and questions. There's no financial advice given at all. So yeah, I think a good example, you kind of touched on it, is like, if I have a house that I'm renting out, that's one LLC. And then I also own a lawn care company that does the maintenance on the lawn. That's a different LLC. And then perhaps I have a pressure washing company that pressure washes the house. That's a third LLC.
Yep.
Now they all kind of feed each other, and all the money comes back to me, but it's through three different businesses.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Absolutely.
Good deal. So another thing that I see a lot is people talk about having, like the I guess it wouldn't matter for someone who doesn't have millions of dollars per se, but like having a trust that's over this LLC and then this LLC. So it's like a big umbrella. So you're like 7 layers protected. At what point would that make sense to do?
So let me go ahead and start by saying of the 6 different areas of financial planning that I do with the clients, the estate planning side of things, we actually outsource to an internal group here at New York Life. So that's my least knowledgeable. But what I can say about the trusts and stuff like that is that you're basically able to reduce things like gift taxes or inheritance taxes or taxes in general by putting things into a trust that's not going to be taxed at the same rate as cash would, right? Or your proceeds from a life insurance policy would, you know what I mean?
Okay, that makes sense. And speaking of life insurance, I've also seen people talk about getting a life insurance and borrowing from that as opposed as a form of a savings account instead of having like your savings account getting the 0.05 interest or whatever it gains.
Yes.
That's
a big part of my business, actually.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a smart move.
100%. I mean, and of course, it's all, specific to each individual, but basically what you're talking about here is having insurance. You need life insurance to be able to protect your loved ones in the event of your death, right? And the whole point of life insurance is to replace your income for however many years you want to do that. Now, the idea of putting after-tax money into an insurance policy that you can pull out of and not pay taxes on anything, such as the gains or anything like that, you're pulling it out in the form of a loan, just like a 401k. The main difference is, especially with indirect recognition companies like the one I work for, the money that you pull out, let's say you have $100,000 in cash value inside of this policy. If you pull 50,000 out and the dividend that you're paid annually is 10%, right? You're going to get 10 grand, even with the 50,000 out, as opposed to
off the overall value of the policy, yes, not off of what's actually in there.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's cool.
Permanent life insurance, in my opinion, is the Swiss Army knife of financial accounts and investment products. It is so versatile.
So like the long-term life insurance, not necessarily short-term.
Yeah, and I'm not, I shouldn't say I'm not a fan of Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey's a genius. Okay, he doesn't have a monopoly on all the great ideas. But what I will say is that term policies, what they don't tell people about is that only 2% of them pay out. So if you're going to have a 20-year term policy, most companies will allow you to convert it to whole life at some point. But the idea of paying, let's say, $5,000 over a 10-year, 20-year period, that's $5,000 free money to an insurance company. And that's how they're able to pay out so much money all the time, because they don't necessarily want you to have the whole life policy, because of all the insurances in the world, and there are more than there probably should be, the only one that's guaranteed is your death, right? Fire insurance is not guaranteed. Flood insurance is not guaranteed. But that's the thing, is that we need to be able to protect our heirs, and we need to be able to pass money without paying taxes on it, which life insurance is the only way you can do that.
Now, when it comes to, like, speaking of death and passing things on without taxes to avoid the inheritance tax, like, let's say I have a house, right? And I want to leave that to my kid, to my daughter. All right. So would it make sense to have that put into a trust versus something else? Like, I don't know what vehicles would be the most beneficial to mitigate the inheritance tax.
Well, in every situation, you should have a will, right? Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to die intestate and make the probate courts. One, it's going to cost more money. Two, it's going to be a lot more emotional and mental turmoil on your family. Sure. And quite frankly, I tell people all the time, your mother and father-in-law could love you throughout your entire relationship, but as soon as money is brought up, right, brings the worst out of people. And you could really, probate ruins a lot of relationships and families because of it. Sure. Those are two big reasons. But the other reason, is obviously financially. We want to make sure that these assets are put in the right places and going to the right people. But for instance, and it's funny you say that about a house specifically. There's actually a situation where if you were to, gift a house or inherit a house, let's say you paid $100,000 for the house back in the 70s. Now it's worth $250,000. Well, when you inherit that house, there's a step up. Right, a step up in cost basis where you don't pay capital gains taxes on the $150,000, right? So in that situation, you will have to pay the gift tax on it if it's gifted in particular terms. But I guess these types of questions are obviously great questions, but they take so many different variables to give you a real answer. Okay. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, well, this, that,
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And going back to Dave Ramsey, I've read a lot of his work, and I will say. Sure. There's, as you are aware, there's different levels of financial ability and things of that nature. And what I mean by that is financial knowledge and literacy. Like for me, when I was getting out of debt, the envelope method was great. It helped me budget and things like that. The snowball method of paying off debt, those things are great. But there comes a threshold when what he is saying actually hinders you and hurts you. Sure. Like when you're in a position to where you can take on debt to, like, if I can take a $10,000 loan out for something, and in return, I can spend this money and get access to this equipment or this resource or this training that I can in turn turn around and make $25,000 off of.
Yeah.
I took that $10,000 debt and I turned it into a $15,000 profit.
Absolutely.
So
well, and that's my main concern, I guess, with Dave, because like I said, Dave is absolutely a genius. His the 6 baby steps, absolutely proven, patented, all that good stuff. Now, like you said, there's a certain population of people that need Dave Ramsey, right? Then there's another population, and the people that have been successful off of his baby steps and all that stuff. Those are the people who graduate to a financial advisor or somebody that needs to be more specific with their things.
Right.
That being said, though, oh goodness, I just lost my train of thought. What were you just talking about?
Taking a debt and turning it into a profit.
Yeah. So in my initial consultation with people, it's what I'm trying to do. My biggest problem with Dave is that he says, debt is bad and cash is king, right? That's simply not true, right? And the reason why it's not is because cash and savings accounts getting less than 1%, right? And in debt today, at least in recent times, was extremely cheap. Right now, it won't probably be like that for quite some time. But the idea here, I show people this. The first thing I show them in my initial consultation is the idea of having a mortgage at 3%. Okay. And then people want to put in additional payments each month to pay off their house. And that may or may not be a good option for people. But what I want them to understand is that by putting, let's say you have $1,000 monthly mortgage and you're going to put $500 extra to it. Well, if there's one thing I definitely learned at business school, it's opportunity cost. What could that $500 do for us otherwise? Because the S&P 500 has returned 10.6% over the last 100 years, right? So if we put that into an investment account, the capital gains return is extreme. I mean, by servicing your debt on a $250,000 home at 3% over 30 years, and I know I'm spitting a lot of numbers, so bear with me, but you're basically going to spend 130 grand in interest, right? But by putting that into an account that earns the same at 3% interest rate, you're going to get a capital gains return of 193,000. So we deduct those, you have $64,000 in net return, right? So when I show people that, they're like, wait a minute, you're telling me if I can borrow money and earn the interest on investment at the same level, I'll come out ahead. Yes, but the idea is we want to get a lot higher than what we're borrowing on our money, right? Because high interest credit card debt, which is a lot of the people that go to Dave, right? The high interest rate credit card debt, that's something you cannot play with. You need to pay that off almost immediately, because at 20%, you're never going to get that in the market, at least not consistently,
Right.
So,
yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Speaking of high interest credit card debt, that's a good segue into the next thing that I want to touch on. A lot of people that you get the high interest credit cards because you're either new to the credit world,
right,
or you've had some hiccups and you've made some mistakes. So you get hit with that 22% interest or whatever it may be. And there's a lot of talk about if people just got paid more money, then there would be less issues like that to deal with. Like you could enjoy a higher quality of life without having to get the credit one credit card or whatever it may be. So like when it comes to like minimum wage, for example, people seem to think that if everyone just gets a $15 or $18 an hour minimum wage, then all the problems will be solved. I personally disagree with that, because I think there's consequences of everyone getting paid more, which in turn, essentially everything's going to cost more. So the value of the dollar is going to continue to decrease. But what are your thoughts on that?
I've stopped calling it simple economics, because economics aren't simple to everybody, right?
Sure.
Changing, a motor on a car is not simple to me, right? But to somebody who does it all the time, it is very simple. So the idea, I have a very, I wouldn't call it dark, but it's just one of those, like, I am a businessman. I am a capitalist, right? And businesses are quite literally in the business of making profits. Okay. That's what they do. And so the idea that a business would ever eat a cost that they would not pass on to the consumer is, to me, crazy, right? And you don't need a business degree to understand why. To stay in business, you have to make a profit. You have to have, you have to have margin. So, to raise, I get where people's minds are in that, CEOs shouldn't be making $200 million a year, right? They shouldn't be making that much money when their bottom wage earners are making $7.25 an hour. And I understand that. But what people do not get, were you gonna say something?
No, I was agreeing with you. I was saying, right.
What I have to be fact checked, but I think NAFTA, when Bill Clinton signed NAFTA, it put a cap on CEO pay, right? And I don't know what the exact number was, but let's say it was $10 million. The majority of CEOs today are paid in stocks, right? And as such, that's not a form of income. That's not like gross income. So it can't be taxed, right? So when people, and this is kind of me alluding on to the tax issue, because that's a big issue in society today, where people like Elon Musk aren't paying their fair share of taxes. But we do not tax wealth, right? We tax income. So his wealth being 200 some odd billion dollars is not his income, because Jeff Bezos makes $80,000 a year. That's what he's paid on a salary. So
Right.
the wealth that's set up into his stocks is not, you can't tax that unless he sells the stocks. So
Yeah, and then there's to touch on that, there one of the company that I worked for is, I'm not going to name them at the risk of them someone there hearing this and them deciding to hit me with a lawsuit, because I'm not a fan of them.
Yeah.
I think now there's good and bad, and I can go into that a little bit, but specifically about what you're talking about, is a healthcare company, one of the largest, if not the largest in the nation. Obviously, it's a for-profit company, so they consistently raise the cost of their services across the board. They have these absurd contractual agreements with insurance companies, and it's chaos. I'm going to actually do a series of podcasts talking about how much of a screw job the insurance healthcare is with the insurance and everything. But anyways, what I'm getting at is the CEO of this company made, I believe, $29.5 million in last year, in 2021. And he was able to get paid that because they restructured his retirement plan. And he got paid in a bunch of stocks. Like he had a base pay of like 1.2 million or something like that. I can't remember exactly. And it's all public information.
Yeah, for sure.
But he got paid like 1.2 million and then $13 million in bonuses. And then just like, it was crazy to me, because what I realized they were doing is they were consistently reducing the number of employees they had to maximize profit, which I think is important to have a profit, but there comes a threshold where if you're putting profit over people, it's problematic. And we saw that like with the COVID surges, for example, people were talking about how we weren't prepared for it. Like in the healthcare industry, there was too many patients for care, and they were blaming it on people, inadequate testing and people just not doing the right things to protect themselves. But to me, the biggest issue with the healthcare surges and the inability for hospitals to deal with them was the fact that there's been a systematic reduction of workforce, from providers to nurses to staff that cleans the hospital rooms, to the maintenance team, to the registration team. There's been a systematic reduction of those people to maximize profit year over year. And what I'm getting at is the CEO, when pressed on that by news agencies, he's like, well, actually, I only got paid this much and the rest is in stocks. So, it's interesting how that works, because he got over half of his income in stock bonuses and stock options and things like that. So he's not going to, until he pays or sells the stock, if he ever does, that's when it's going to matter,
Well, and that, I guess that was my point with Bill Clinton, was that he indirectly caused that, right? Yeah. Because his intention, of course, was to not let CEOs make over $100 million a year. But then, the thing about it is that the people who write the tax code are very smart, and they can be bought. Okay. And so the idea, that, what's funny to me is that people want to go after these billionaires. You need to go after the people writing the tax code. I've always subscribed to the notion that you cannot hate the player, you must hate the game. Right. I cannot hate Jeff Bezos for literally going up to the IRS building in Philadelphia, knocking on the door, getting in the building, and telling those guys that wrote the Tax Jobs Cuts Act, between the Trump's tax code, he told them, I will pay you 10 times what you're making, and you have, private jet access. And they're like, yeah, that beats the heck out of the public sector money, right? So I don't hate Jeff Bezos for doing that. That's why he never, Amazon's not paying taxes, because the guys who wrote the code are doing their taxes. Right. And so anyways, I kind of getting off track here, but nevertheless, that is absolutely how these guys are getting away with that, right? And so going back to my point about my view on business being dark, is that there's capitalism, and the capitalism in theory is the greatest economic system that has ever lived. But when you add lobbying, all right, when you add all these different things, now you have crony capitalism. Yeah. Right now you have, and this is a whole different ballgame, and it's not right. So
absolutely. And I think, are you familiar with the term conscious capitalism?
I've heard it. I'm not familiar with it though.
So basically, in short, it is where you utilize the benefits of your ability to make money in capitalism, and you, instead of taking the money and paying lobbyists or paying politicians to ensure you make a couple more $1 billion next year,
Right.
you take that money and you invest it in the community. And it's almost a combination of, they take some of the aspects of socialism and apply it with capitalism, but not because the government's taking the money, because they're making the conscious decision to help their community.
Yeah.
So like for me, if let's say I make $10 million, instead of me lobbying to get the politician in that's going to ensure I keep all of that money, right, I'm going to take that $2 million I was going to spend on lobbying and on paying people off and doing that, and I'm going to put it in community programs to help my community. So it obviously gets a lot deeper than that, but I think that's probably, it would be like, there's capitalism in the middle. On the left, there's the, on one side, there's the crony capitalism, and on the other, it's conscious capitalism.
Yeah. Well, there's a direct impact from the money, right? You're directly positively impacting the mass majority of people, as opposed to just yourself being self-serving.
Exactly. And like you said, it's don't hate the player, hate the game. These billionaires are not the problem. They're a product of the problem. Literally. The problem is, like you said, that people are bought, that you can put someone in a position of power to make legislation and ensure that it benefits you and your organization. Speaking of that, what do you think about the legislators, the lawmakers, members of Congress, Senate, House of Representatives, all of that, having the ability to play in the stock market game?
Well, there's two different things I want to say here. So first, before I even get into that, I want people to understand that, yes, we need congressional term limits on our legislators, but the biggest problem is that the people who are not reelected go into lobbying, and they have those connections in their pocket already. So that's another thing that we need to really be focusing on, is how many of those people are not being reelected and going straight into lobbying and being the real power player under the curtain. Right. Now, to your point, I don't know how, I know how the law is how, but we need to, we're in such a day and age where we can literally just write things off as, that is one of those things, Travis, where we all know that's not right. You know, I don't think, the only people that don't think it's not right are the people that are doing it, and they're the ones that make the decisions, unfortunately. But that is not right. It's not fair, right? And under any circumstance that they can literally make trades. And you're, let me just put it this way. I've been in this business for 18 months. And on 3 different occasions, I had people tell me insider information, right? Now, it doesn't become a crime until I share it with somebody that capitalizes on it. But for instance, you know, a famous company and their famous CEO was stepping down, right? And actually 4 weeks ahead of time, because it was an internal message. And as soon as he said it, he was like, I'm not supposed to say that. And I'm thinking like, oh, this is going to, you know, negatively affect the stock price. You know, so what I'm getting at is that you cannot tell me that Nancy Pelosi or whoever else in office is not calling Jamie Dimon, right, over at JP Morgan, right, or Lloyd Blank over at you know, they're absolutely in contact with each other, partly because they're, you know, powerful people and have a lot of money, but also they went to school together, right? And their grandkids and kids go to school together, you know, like Harvard, like the Ivy League, they're all, the elites are in their own category, man. And I think, not to get off topic with this, but it's never been red versus blue, man. It's always been elites versus common folks. And for whatever reason, we don't have any leverage because we're too fat, happy, and comfortable. So
it's, well, a lot of it, yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. A lot of the reason that we don't do anything about it, or at this point can't really do anything about it, is because they do a great job of funding the media that keeps everyone separated.
Yeah.
You know, and
the same elites own the media. You know, they literally own the companies. Like,
and like I saw, you know, the whole thing with Elon Musk talking about buying Twitter outright. I also saw your post where you're talking about at what point are they not honoring their fiduciary responsibilities to take that deal, because 20% over stock price, hello, you know what I'm saying? That makes sense. But I saw Business Insider made a post talking about how it's terrible that he's going to do that, how a troll could possibly take over and this and that. But then, and someone's like screenshot that, and then the post that they made about Jeff Bezos buying.
You're talking about the Defiant L's, the Twitter account that's called Defiant L's. Okay. I'm not sure if you're on Twitter, but it is the best follow you can have on Twitter, because they do that. They'll take an old post and put the hypocrisy on top of it and show you the irony in it all. Anyways, absolutely. Jeff Bezos owning Washington Post, and how they talked about that was so great. And now they're like, this is a detriment to society that Elon could possibly own Twitter.
Yeah, It's crazy because, and then there's several other billionaires or multimillionaires that own major media outlets.
Absolutely.
And of course, they're going to put the narrative that's going to ensure they're making the most money. And at this point, the best way to do that is to keep the people focused on Trump versus Biden,
Right.
or whatever the issues may be in society. And then I'm not trying to downplay like the police brutality issues or like the poverty issues or any of that. I'm not trying to downplay those, but if at the end of the day, those are just limbs on the tree of the problem. And if you want to hit the root of the problem, you have to go after these power people that really aren't even in power, but they're funding the people that are in power.
Absolutely.
You know, I tell people all the time, I'm like, if you want to see the problem, if you want to find out where the problem lies, you have to follow the money. How does someone that makes $260,000 a year as a member of government have a net worth of $400 million? Mathematically, even if you are killing it in the stock market, like there's no way if you're doing it legally.
Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, man.
It's, you know what I'm saying? So it sucks to see, but you know, all you can do is try to spread the word, and hopefully enough people will have enough, get sick enough of it, and something can come of it, or enough people will get caught doing the insider trading and things like that.
And you know, this, you know, I'm a business conservative. I'll go ahead and say that. That means I lean left on social issues and right on fiscal matters. And I think I realize it, first of all. Second of all, that being said, to your point, you know, we have a January 6th situation, right? And that happens. And it's, but the media that we were just talking about, that's controlled by these people that they're, you know, allegedly attacking, are controlling the narrative, where it's like, this is the worst day in our democracy. And it's like, no, we actually just weren't fat, happy, and comfortable that day. And we were fed up with whatever. I say we, I'm not a part of anything to do with that, but it's a great example. I mean, it's just a great example of that, you know, the revolution, like that is just, you look back in history, man, revolutions are commonplace. And that's what you overthrow empires and dynasties with, is people being fed up with what they're getting. And I don't know how much longer we have until we break through that, but yeah, man, you know, getting off track again, but
no worries.
You know, it's just, absolutely, man. So I guess to kind of circle all of that back, you know, again, you can't single out things without having everything else in front of you to be able to look at, and then objectively make decisions based on that, from the perspective of this billionaire owns this billionaire owns that. You know what I mean? I don't think anybody really needs to own all of it, you know?
Right, absolutely. And it's funny because they're like, we break up companies that are concerned that may be in monopolies, but it's like, well, what about the ones that are monopolies that you don't care about, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but anyways, we'll get back to finances. I think I told you before we started recording, one of the things that I'll try to do with my podcast is share baseline information, like entry level information, if you will, about personal development and personal growth. And obviously finances is a significant factor in that.
Absolutely.
From the stress levels to over half the divorces in this nation are a result of poor finances.
Studies have shown that your well-being is highly correlated with your financial situation.
Absolutely. You know? Well, yeah, because your ability to have a higher quality of life and food and do things and spend time with your friends, and from those aspects to the, you know, the stress that you're put under, to if you don't have money, you know, you live a significantly riskier life. You're eating the fast food all the time because
survival mode. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So what are some of the basics that you would share? Like if someone's coming to you and they're 18 years old and they're like, hey man, I'm just starting, I make $10 an hour. I don't want to live like this forever, but what are some of the things that you would say to someone who's just starting out, how to avoid the bad debt of the 22% credit card interest, to, you know, where they should put whatever nest egg they may be able to develop, and just things like that?
You know, I think one of the best financial decisions I ever made was starting my Roth account at 19 when I was in school for finance and realized what it was. And I started off just putting $50 in every week for my pizza delivery money, right? And so when I have people come in here who don't make a lot of money, I highly encourage and almost don't let them leave the office without setting up a Roth, and just get in the habit of putting $20 in there a month, right? That's, you know, maybe some people don't have that $20 to put in there, but you really do. You can cut costs. And by creating these financial habits early, by creating, you know, the other thing I think is getting in the habit of not spending more than you make, right? I think for whatever reason, people have been conditioned to think that they can spend more than they make and then pay it later because they're like, oh, I'm just going to get another paycheck. I can pay off that debt. That is not how the human mind works. You know what I mean? And this whole, going back to Dave Ramsey, the idea is to buy term and invest the rest. And in the end, you'll have so much money built up through the stock market that you won't even have to worry about life insurance to pass on to your heirs because you'll have millions of dollars to do it. That's not how human nature works, man. Anytime you get a raise, right? We should quite literally, just on a fundamental level, we shouldn't be using that to buy a new car or upgrade our house or this or that. Like we should be living off a standard lifestyle or a standard. And of course, there's breaks or there's different levels of income where you can say, you know what, I can actually stop buying the $2 steaks. All right, maybe I can move up to the $10 steaks because I have it now, right? But the two biggest things I think is budgeting. Learn how to create a budget. And if you're 18 years old, it's not hard these days. TikTok or YouTube can show you how to do that. And don't get out of the habit of looking at your budget each month. Do not get out of the habit. That is a huge, I think budgeting is one of the most underutilized tools in all of finance. And it's the most simple, in my opinion. And then the other thing is, don't take what people say to you for more than just a grain of salt. When someone says credit cards are bad, do your research, right? Because that was the second greatest decision I ever made, was getting a credit card. And the very simple story on it was I just paid my cell phone bill with the credit card and had the draft come out of my account the same day it was paid on my credit card. And I was able to build a phenomenal credit score over that 8-year period because I didn't put anything else on there, right? So I don't know. I have people that tell me, they're like, well, hold on, don't you have to pay interest on the money you spend on the card? Not if you pay it off every month.
Yeah, it's only the only interest you pay is when you have a balance at the billing date.
And so when I come across people, sorry to cut you off, but when I come across people that are like, oh, I'll never touch a credit card, I'm like, no, you need to understand what the power of credit cards really is, what it offers. So those are two things that I would say: the budgeting and then getting in the habit of saving and investing, right? Create those habits now.
Okay, good deal. Now you mentioned the Roth account. You're referring to a Roth IRA, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, so could you share the difference? Like, I know the difference, but a lot of people might not. The difference between a standard IRA and a Roth IRA, and even one step further, would you say, or why would you suggest a Roth IRA versus a 401k even?
So the first part, the 401k, if there's a match incentive that comes with it from your company, should be the first thing that you invest in, right? Because it's not usually a situation where people are picking between an IRA or a 401k. In most situations, people are doing both. I'm doing both. And that's because I'm maxing out my 401k and then I need elsewhere to put money that can be, the taxes are deferred until retirement. Now, the difference between a traditional and a Roth, quite simply, is the money that you put into a traditional, you're able to deduct from your earned income. Let's say you make $50,000 a year. The cap on a traditional and Roth IRA currently is $6,000. If you put $6,000 into a traditional, at the end of the year, you actually made $44,000 because the government is giving you that ability to deduct that from your earned income. Now, the trade-off is when you go to retire, right, you're going to have to pay taxes on the gains and the withdrawals of the contributions aren't taxed because actually, I'm sorry, they are taxed because they're reduced from your income. So everything, 100% of the money inside of that account, if it grows to $1 million, is going to be taxed on whatever the tax rates are at that time. The Roth, you're putting in after-tax dollars, right? And what that means is you're not able to deduct the earned income when you go to file your taxes, right? It's not actually a thing where you're paying taxes out of your cash account at all, right? I think people get confused where it's like, if you were to do both of them, you would put in $6,000 would come out of your banking account, but you wouldn't pay a tax bill out of pocket for the Roth. And so the trade-off with the Roth is when you go into retirement, the gains and the contributions are not taxed. So that's, honestly, I think the biggest problem that people our age, we're the bridge millennials, or at least I'm a bridge millennial, which is, between that gap of the millennials where I was in and out of the analog and digital age. That being said, our biggest problem is going to be the increase in taxes in the future, man, because, in the last 22 years, we've issued $25 trillion worth of debt. And that's going to come out of somewhere. And I can tell you, it's not going to be anybody who has the wealth now. We're going to experience the greatest transfer of wealth ever, with 30 trillion being handed down from the baby boomers to Generation X. And so, it's going to come out of our pockets. So the best thing that you can do for yourself is create after-tax retirement income, and the Roth IRA or Roth 401k is the best way to do that.
Okay, good deal. Good deal. That's I can't remember where I heard initially the difference between a Roth IRA and a standard IRA or traditional IRA.
Well, And let me give you the one sentence answer, right? So the one sentence answer is with a Roth, you're paying the taxes today. You're paying taxes on the seed, not the crop. Okay.
Yeah.
Because, no one wants to pay, you would pay more on the crop, of course, than you would on the seed. So,
And
the
let's
Roth
face
is the way
it,
to go.
yeah, the tax rate's not going to go down.
We're actually in one of the lowest tax rate environments we've ever been in. Oddly
Really?
enough. Absolutely, man.
Well,
In this,
open mouth, insert foot then.
well, it's just one of those things where, like, in the 70s and 80s, the top income earners were paying 70, even up to 90% in income taxes. And of course, there were incentives to lower that, but it's just, I don't think people realize we are in one of the lowest, taxed environments, and it's only going to go up. It has to. Or the countries that we owe the money to are going to come take it, which, that's their prerogative. But nevertheless, it's coming out of somewhere, and it's going to be our paychecks. So.
Yeah, gotcha. And those are some pretty solid, pieces of advice, because that's, I wish I would have gotten that advice when I was younger. And in fact, I went to my dad when I was like 24, 25. And, my dad's a successful businessman. He's, made his share of money. He provided an exceptional standard of living for me and my siblings, and, throughout our childhood and everything. So I was under the impression when I first started hearing about saving money and 401ks and things, like, okay, so my dad's smart. He's probably got some stuff set up there. So I went to him and asked him, and he was kind of like, well, I really don't have a 401k or IRA, because he's like, I have my savings account, and I have, the Social Security basically. And that I was like devastated, because I just knew he was going to give me some rock solid advice. And then that's when I started looking. I was like, okay, if my dad doesn't know, then I got to find someone who does, because no one else in my family really knows. And like, if anyone in my family is listening, that's not a knock on anyone or anything like that. But the reality is, most people in my family don't have that financial intelligence to tell me, hey, go start a Roth IRA and put whatever you can in there, or even go get a credit card and put your phone bill on it, or pay gas and then have the money come out the same day, so you're not paying interest. None of that. Like, I think I got my first credit card when I was 23 or 24. Maybe actually, I think I was 22, and I was dumb enough to, I don't know if you play any mobile games, but there was this game I got severely hooked on called Game of War. And
I've seen the ads.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great game. I built friendships with people from all over the world. Some of them I still talk to consistently. So if I go to Australia, I got a friend I can go have a beer with. Awesome. If I go to the UK, I got a friend I can have a beer with. Poland, like it's great in that sense. Absolutely. But boy, did I max out my credit cards on that fucking game. And like, they would have these little packs that were like $5 at first, then 10, then 25, then 50, then 100. And you
gotta have it, man.
Every Friday I was like up till 2 a.m. drinking beer and smoking weed and playing Game of War. And I spent a couple $1,000s. And then when you add in the interest on it, I spent several $1,000s paying off the cards and everything. So yeah, I would have loved to have had what you just shared with me, back then. So hopefully someone that hears this can learn from that. And it doesn't even, I know that's entry level, if you will, but just because you're 27 or 30 doesn't mean it's not good at solid advice either,
Here's the thing, man. And so, kind of much like yourself, I come from a household of public educators, right? So the majority of my inspiration to even study finance was the fact that we had what we needed, not what we wanted. And nobody in my family knows how to manage money correctly, So I say that to say, everything that, the funny thing is that, we think of lawyers, think of doctors, you think of financial advisors, we all speak a language, right? That most people don't speak. We are translators. And that's what we get paid to do, is to translate those languages. The lawyer translates the law, of course, doctors, medicine, us, financial code and tax code. But the funny thing is, all of that information is online, right? And you could easily learn it. This is not rocket science. Finance is not rocket science. And I think TikTok's done a good job of showing that. Of course, the problem with TikTok content creators is none of them have licenses. None of them have anything like that, because if they did, they couldn't speak so freely on it, right? Which is why I kind of, with the trust conversation we had earlier, I don't like to get into deeply with those conversations, because someone might take that, do it, and then, be in a bind and say, well, Grant is the one that told me to do that. Now I have a lawsuit on my hands. So nevertheless, I definitely think that we need to be a lot less lazy, right? We need to be reading
Sure.
into things a lot more than we actually do.
Yeah, be
So
proactive.
this stuff can be found on Bankrate or NerdWallet or whatever. You know, it's at your fingertips. So
Yeah. Well, I think one of the reasons, well, there's several reasons. One of the reasons people don't do it is just pure laziness.
Sure,
Another reason is they're lacking confidence in their ability
sure,
to understand and trust the information. But
absolutely.
also, there's just something that's a little bit more, that provides a little more peace of mind if I say, I got this advice from my financial advisor versus, yeah, I heard about this on TikTok. You
Absolutely.
know what I'm saying? Like there's a
100%.
lot of factors to it. And I agree,
And
you should go
right.
ahead.
I was gonna say I don't change my own oil.
Yeah.
I know how to,
And,
but
I use that analogy a lot. Like when I talk to, as a life coach, people will often, some of the most common questions that I get is, or one of the statements I should say, not necessarily questions, is like, why would I need a life? Who needs a life coach? Like what does a life coach do? Or, I'll get well, I don't need a therapist. Are you a therapist? You know what I'm saying? You're not a therapist. You're not a psychologist. And I'm like, no, you're right. I'm a life coach. And that's why I identify with being a life coach and not a therapist. One, I don't have license and certificates and degrees in that capacity. But I explain to people, I'm like, when your transmission goes out in your car, do you pull the transmission out in your driveway and repair it or put in a new one? Or do you take it to an expert? If you want to get on a diet plan or you want to learn how to be more physically fit, what do? You get a personal trainer or a dietitian, a nutritionist.
who can translate that language.
Exactly. And I explain that to him. I'm like, if as a life coach, what I do is I take you share with me what's going on, where you're at in your life and where you want to be. And I provide you with the guidance and the information to get you there. And so I've never heard it like, yeah, as a translator, I like that. I translate all of the books that I have back here, the tens of thousands of dollars and thousands of hours I've spent studying and digesting and applying this stuff to my life. And I say, oh, I remember when I had this situation, I read about this. Here's something that may be beneficial. And there's no difference. Like how do therapists get their license? They study books.
Literally.
The difference is I've applied most of the stuff I've talked about. So I appreciate that analogy of I'm a translator of the self-help information, and I break it down in layman's terms.
Well, and to your point there with the books, man, I without sounding arrogant, I get told a lot that people think I'm extremely intelligent, right? And I'm really not. I actually read the textbooks I paid for in college, and that's not a joke. Like I actually put the time into reading it, and I did well on my exams and was able to have academic success. But just read, man. Don't try to just pass the exam. Like put the time into it. You obviously did with your books. Now you're a successful life coach, and that's what it takes. And I don't think people are prepared to confront that. So
yeah, it's twofold. It's study the information, gain the knowledge, and apply the shit.
Absolutely.
Like
it's a muscle dog.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly like I tell people all the time, any characteristic that you want to develop to get this goal accomplished or to get this level of position in like leadership, for example, I tell people all the time, the best leaders are those that know how to do the job of the team members and that can communicate it in a way that every individual team member receives and it can apply it. Like I can talk to you one way, but I might not be able to talk to your coworker that way. There's certain ways that you have to wear different hats with everyone.
Emotional intelligence and grassroots, leadership, man. Just coming up the system. You have to understand from the bottom to the top, the company or whatever organization you're in.
Exactly. One of the first things I did when I took this promotion out in Tallahassee with the company I'm no longer with, but I went to the people individually because there was different positions that weren't at my hospital necessarily back in Pensacola. And I went to them and I spent time with them and I shadowed them and I learned how to do the job because I have a problem telling you to do a job that I don't know how to do. Not just that, but what if you need the day off and you're the only one that knows how to do the job?
Right.
Is the job I work in hospital. I can't just not do the job.
Right.
So I had to learn those things. And, I got a tremendous amount of respect from the team because I took the time to learn the job and to do everything. And when it got busy and chaos ensued and everything, I was able to go on the front line with them and guide them because I knew the process and understood it. And much like you're saying, like you provide the guidance and the translations of people from those financial textbooks that you read, and you break it down in layman's terms.
That's
you
it.
know. So to keep going about like the life coaching thing, not my life coaching, but part of what I want to talk about is kind of your mindset on things. Like we touched on a little before we started recording. You're really into personal development, self-growth, and things like that. So there's, excuse me, my iPad fell. There's a couple of questions that I want to ask you, and then I want to implement it on all my podcasts that I have guests on. And the first one, well, we can just start with stress, right? I'm sure you have a very stressful job dealing with other people's money. So how do you deal with the stress that comes your way of doing that?
Well, I think I've never really struggled with stress or anxiety. I think it's a blessing to have not struggled with it, but I've always been one of those types where as soon as there's a problem, I am hitting it head on. As awkward, as uncomfortable as it may be, I've always been the type to just face it now because I've let things sit and thwart, and it gets way worse. And I've taken that approach in school. I've taken that approach in my career. So I say that to say, the stress of giving somebody advice, I'm in the business of projecting with a crystal ball, right? I'm saying what we're doing with your money today is going to produce this based off a ton of hypothetical numbers. And people take those numbers and they think that they're written in concrete. And so the best thing I can do is take very thorough notes on our conversations, be very concise with my communication with the client, because, what is it? I forget what the phrase is, but the quicker things happen, the faster they are to go, right? So if a client comes in, it's incredible on the occasions that people will come in here, and after 15 to 20 minutes of our initial meeting, they're like, Grant, you know what? I want you to take this money and do whatever the hell you think should be done with it, because whatever you're saying, I automatically know you know what you're talking about. And so, well, that's kind of how Hitler came to power. You know what I mean? People just became lazy and they're like, yeah, well, this, that. But also that's how a year later, people are thinking, I should be getting a 10% return. Why am I getting a 5% return? Well, you didn't understand that there was a lull period here on this particular product or account. And so they're going to take their money and leave because they didn't understand what we were doing in the first place. So the best way I handle stress in my career is by simply doing things the right way, no matter how long they take to do it. No matter how much more work it takes, it makes me sleep better at night, and it makes me feel more comfortable in what I'm doing. So
fair enough.
Outside of that, I go to the gym.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. That's a good one. I've learned because when you hear stress, people automatically take it as a negative. Yeah. But in fact, now I'll preface by saying stress that is not dealt with is a negative. But stress itself, yeah, exactly. Stress itself is a positive because it is the brain's way of saying, hey, you need to take action.
Yeah.
So like, for example, if I have a boss that stresses me out every time I see them, I get stressed. It is saying, hey, you need to have a conversation to clear up the air with them, or you need to find a new job, or whatever it may be. If I get stressed out,
that's going to lead to your relationships with your husband or your wife or your kids. 100%. It's going to affect like a pound. Yeah.
100%. And then if from a physical sense of stress on the body, if my body, if I'm like overweight or unhealthy and there's stress that's on my joints and on my organs and things like that, that is a sign that, hey, you need to take action and alleviate the stress.
Right.
Now, it comes to negative when you let it compound, and that is when it becomes that chronic stress that kills everyone.
Absolutely.
10 of the leading causes of death in this country are stress related. It's great. And another fun fact is over 80% of the primary care visits in America are directly connected to a stress-related activity or event. So, I mean, just fixing your stress, listening to the stress and doing something about it. And then that's when it comes in like, hey, who studied stress to learn how to deal with it? And there's podcasts that are beautiful. They talk about it so much. There's so many great people that talk specifically about stress and can help with that. But I just wanted to put that out there because you had said, go ahead.
I was gonna say, man, what came to my mind immediately right there is it's probably the case that most people don't even know how to identify their stress.
Yeah.
They
That's
don't
step
even
one.
know where to begin. Like they don't know what's causing it, right? They don't know that, oh, their spouse not talking to them in a certain way that they'd want to be talked to is creating a level of stress because they think that their relationship's tearing apart. Now
Yeah,
it's seeping into their career. So it's like, what if you can't even identify what the root source of your stress is, right?
exactly.
Because I understand stress is ubiquitous and pretty much everything in life, right? You can have stress in your joints, stress in your relationship, stress in your money, your finances, but like there's a root cause to the stress.
Sure.
Something is the nucleus of the stress from my ignorant opinion or ignorant thought process. You would know more, I'm sure,
No,
than I do.
you're spot on, because that's the reality of it. That's so the first thing you must do to make a change is get clarity on the situation.
Absolutely.
Right. And that's universal across the board. If I want to make more money, I have to get clarity on how I can do that. If I want to invest to get a bigger return on my investments, I have to get clarity. One of the ways to get clarity is going to someone like you and saying, hey, you're a professional, you're an expert. How can you help me? So you have to, once you are aware that stress exists, you have to be able to say, oh, my heart racing every time I see this person, my palms getting sweaty, that feeling of anxiety in my chest, that means that I'm stressing about something. And then you have to have the conscious ability to take a step back and say, where's the stress coming from? Is it because my boss just walked up to me and asked me to come to their office and they didn't tell me why? Is it because my wife didn't talk to me the way that I wanted to, or whatever? Is it because we got another bill that I don't have the money to pay? You know what I'm saying? Like that. So you're 100% correct. Having the ability to identify where the stress stems from is step one in alleviating it. Because if you don't, you're throwing darts with a blindfold at that point if you don't know.
Yeah. You got to identify a problem before you can fix it.
Exactly. So to kind of go off of that, I like to, we both talked about books, and you seem to be an avid reader. I'm an avid reader. I think the quickest way to get the results you want in life is to learn through other people's experiences. Obviously, you have to experience it yourself, but if you want to get the knowledge on how to handle the experience, you have to go through someone who's done it. So if let's say you passed away, you have family, you have your children and grandchildren that you've left behind, and you leave a list of 3 to 5 books without explaining to them why you left the books, and what the books are, what books would you leave? Like to best suit, to set them up for success in their life? Which 3 to 5?
Outside of the first one, they're not in any particular order, but Atomic Habits is number 1. That is the greatest book I've probably ever read. I have 2 copies of it, and I've read it maybe 4 times now and listened to it on the audiobook. It is, anyways, I cannot recommend that book enough. I follow James Clear. I get his 321 email every week, and I'm telling you, it is. But the funny thing about Atomic Habits is that it's all stuff you already know, man. It's just put in a way that it
you would be surprised though, because I've learned, because like this is much like you deal with finances all day, I deal with the habits and communication and stress and mindset all day. You would be surprised what we believe to be common knowledge.
Sure, absolutely. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect.
yeah, exactly. But go ahead.
So yeah, I mean, Atomic Habits, man, that's number 1. James Clear, phenomenal book. Nudge was a book I read. So one of my biggest, or one of my guilty pleasures, I guess, is, I would say, so my career as a financial advisor is more or less a lifestyle career, right? Like it's become my identity, right? So, in a lot of ways, I'm 27, have no kids, I'm single, so I'm out networking all the time. I also live downtown, so I'm at every networking event you can be at. So you build this identity. And oddly enough, this is the first time I haven't worn a suit and tie to the office ever. It happens to be a Saturday, and Alabama's playing, so roll Tide. But Nudge is the book that I'm referring to. I read it in college, and it's by Dr. Richard Thaler. Side note about him, he's the one who he won the Nobel Prize for Economics by simply changing the 401k plan to be an opt-in automatically. Instead of having, it automatically you're opted in automatically the moment you're employed, as opposed to having to select it. And so the prize that he won, the whole point of it was like the default selection that, let's say, Windows gives you when you set up your thing. They put a blue line around the OK button, and it will even often say recommended, right? That's what he did for 401ks, and he saved government, society, hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars by people automatically contributing to their 401k. So that's a phenomenal book because it's behavioral economics. And it talks about a lot of stuff that you're like, wow, I didn't even know that when I walk by a jewelry store and they put something that's worth $200 and something that's worth $1,000 and something in the middle, they're literally building value to a product that's actually not worth the value. They're just putting a price tag in between a big price tag and a small. These systems that we've built in our head from a psychological standpoint overlap into our economic decision-making processes. And Nudge is phenomenal for that.
What's his name again?
Dr. Richard Thaler. I got a little geeked out there. I was losing my mind because I was like,
no, that's
I
beautiful.
read that book again because it's so good.
I'm writing it down. That's why I asked.
On the cover, I think it says something about health, wealth, and prosperity. But that's the whole point of the behavioral economics, is to understand your decision-making process when it comes to economics and finance. Because as I was saying, it would obviously be my opinion, just based off my work, that your financial situation is arguably more important than your health or your other well-being situations, because of how much of a direct impact it has on that. Nevertheless, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That's a classic. I think everybody needs to read that. The 12 Rules for Life, Jordan Peterson, big Jordan Peterson guy. I just went to a show when he was in Pensacola not too long ago.
Awesome.
Phenomenal, man. And then the last one is one that may or may not be one for most people, but Tribe by Sebastian Junger, and how he talks about we all yield to be a part of a tribe. Like in our DNA for the last 249,000 years, minus the 1,000 of the Roman Empire, changed civilization forever. We were in villages of 100 some odd people, and we knew everybody, right? And now we live in a society. I live in an apartment complex downtown with 1,000 people in there. I don't even know anybody outside of myself. And that level of stress that adds, right? You're driving down the highway and you have two 2,000-pound missiles going within 4 feet of each other. We're not used to that, bro. We're not used to that, That just happened like 50 years ago.
Right. And that's why stress is so heightened when you're on the road, because the consequences of a poor decision is death.
Yeah. The margin of error is extremely low.
Yeah. And then it's like you're literally putting your lives in the hands of other people driving down the road, hoping that they're going to stop at the stop sign, and hoping that just because their light's red, they're not going to blow through it. It's tough.
And even deeper than that, you're just hoping they got an adequate amount of sleep, right? To have the motor skills to not, if they lean down to pick up the bag of chips they drop on the floorboard, to be able, it's like, it's crazy when you really break it down.
Yeah. But they're not texting.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And so but we operate with these stress levels and subconscious levels. We don't even know they exist, right? We don't even know that we're stress driving because we're used to it now. Right?
Yeah.
It's built in our DNA at this point. It's not built in our DNA, but we literally live with it every day, and you can't really get too stressed out about it because it is what it is. You're going to drive the car to work.
Exactly.
So, anyways, those 5 books. I'm going to repeat them one more time. Atomic Habits, Nudge, How to Win Friends and Influence People, The 12 Rules of Life, and Tribe. Those are my books.
I appreciate that.
I put a lot of thought into that.
Good deal. Now, let me ask you this. Have you read the book that James Clear based Atomic Habits off of, The Power of Habits by Charles Duhigg?
I haven't. I've been told I need to read it, but I haven't gotten around to it.
If you want to geek out a little bit on habits, like James Clear gives you the stuff, like you said, the stuff we should all know. Like he gives it in a very simplistic manner, not simplistic in a bad way, but in a good way.
It's just rudimentary, man. It's not complex whatsoever.
Yeah. Charles Duhigg really goes in The Power of Habit and gives you the science behind it.
Gotcha.
I'm a huge fan of James Clear as well. I read his book when it first came out, Atomic Habits, and I listened to it. Actually, I read it. I rented it. I got it from the library, and then because I still use the library from time to time.
I still pirate books offline.
There you go. Don't say that too loud. And then I got Audible and listened to the audiobook for about 2 weeks straight, every chance I could, like in the shower, in the gym, in the car, wherever I was. I think I listened to it like 3 or 4 times over that period.
Yeah.
And then I bought the book again, or I bought the book. I think I got it at a Goodwill for like $2.
Yeah, I bet.
That's a hack. If anyone wants personal development books, go to your local Goodwill, $2 to $5, and most of the time they're loaded with quality books. I get a lot of my books from Goodwill, and most of them are in great shape. That's
something I did not know, actually, and will certainly be doing.
Dude, you're in Pensacola. There's the one in Inslee. That one has
over there on 9 Mile and Pipe Horse.
The one by Hungry Howie's on Palafox.
Oh, okay, yeah, gotcha. Palafox.
Yeah, they used to have a good selection. I don't know how it is now. I haven't lived there in almost 3 years. And then, but definitely the one off of Olive.
Okay.
That
I know
newer
exactly the big one.
Yeah, that one's typically those had some good books. Now they're not in any order, so you got to take time to look. But the payoff is great. You'll find some really good books.
Well, I finally got a bookshelf, right? And I guess in college I used to download the PDF version, but now that I'm making pretty good money, I can actually afford to buy the book. So I'm stat. My goal was I'm not paying the author today, but in the future I will buy this book because it was so good that I owe it to the author to buy it. You know, so
and you know what? It's like that sometimes. Now it's all about where you place the value of the money, and I've learned, to me, like buying a book brand new or at full price, I am significantly more likely to actually read it, appreciate it, and apply it.
Yeah, there's something to that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Behavioral economics.
Yeah, right, exactly. Have you speaking of Jordan Peterson, I'm sure his lecture was phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
I really wanted to go to it, but with the newborn and stuff, we just, it wasn't. And honestly, like, I read 12 Rules for Life, and while people make fun of it and things like that, I tell people all the time, one of the biggest pieces of advice I offer my clients or anyone that's willing to hear is clean your fucking room before you try to clean the world. Like, and it's, people make jokes about it, make fun of it, but it's like, you can't do anything if yours isn't in order. You have to get your stuff in order.
It's and kind of relating it to like Stoicism and Jordan Peterson and Atomic Habits. The recipe to success is not hard. It's not a real radical or rocket science formula, man. It's very simple stuff. You have, and Nick Saban is the epitome of the process, right? If you're not going to make the play in practice and make every single play, then, because a lot of us, we look too far ahead, right? When these players are thinking about a championship, well, none of that matters if the play today in this moment is not done correctly.
Correct.
Because then the guy next to you can't do what he's supposed to do correctly. So you have to literally just lock in every day on the task at hand and knock it out, man. And that's the key to success, bro. Put the blinders on, block out the distractions.
Yeah, that's why goals are so important. Like, when you're setting goals, it's you have to have a big, grandiose goal. Like, that makes sense. But you also need to have a series of habits or actions or tasks or smaller goals that you take every day that ensure you go in that direction.
Absolutely.
Now, when it comes to football, obviously you can't guarantee a national title, but you can guarantee that you're going to be primed in the best possible position to get that, by doing that. And back to Jordan Peterson, two things I'll say. When I started talking about him with my wife, she wasn't really bought in because of his whole, like, the image that he was painted as with the whole compelled speech law that he came out against. But I introduced him to his work as she started listening to it. She's a huge fan now, which I greatly appreciate. But also, have you read his newer book, Beyond Order?
Yeah, so I actually had bought that at the bookstore, the Bodacious bookstore, because when I got the tickets, my business partner got us the tickets. Those business write-offs, those are always nice.
Hey,
and so the VIP tickets they were great, but I had to buy the book and read it. Now, what I wish I would have known, and if you go to a future show, he may do this at every show, but when he started the lecture, he picked a chapter. He picked chapter 7 from the Beyond Order book. And I wish I would have read that again, like 30 minutes before the lecture, so I could have remembered every little, thing and how he was relating it to it. But nevertheless, yes, absolutely. Both of those books were phenomenal.
Good deal. Good deal. Yeah, I've not read Beyond Order. That's my wife was reading it before me. I think she's done now. It's I'm looking over, it's on the bookshelf. And funny enough, it's right beside Atomic Habits.
Good stuff, man.
Yes, sir.
I cannot speak highly enough about Atomic Habits. I keep
it's
horse,
great.
But golly, everybody needs to read that.
Absolutely. So to carry on from there, I think I asked you kind of from a financial standpoint. And I guess these two questions, the next two questions I want to ask, kind of tie in together. But in general, what have you learned on your own that you wish somebody would have taught you early in life? So it doesn't have to be financial, but it can be.
Well, I'm going to defer because I put some time into these questions, and I guess to give the listeners, I was worried that with all my licenses and all the legal obligations that I have, I didn't want to be too exposed on some of these things. But Travis asked the most in-depth, thorough questions I could go through, and I put quite a bit of time into this. Quick, let's see. I I wish, I guess I would have known that life is about choices, right? Like my high school football coach every day after practice said the same thing, man. He said grades are the most important. The recruiters, when they come in, they don't even come to my office. They go to the transcripts. They go to the front office to get your transcripts. If your grades aren't there, they're not even gonna come talk to me. The next thing he would say is life is about choices. And every choice you make, good or bad, has a consequence, right? And that kind of ties into what we've been talking about here with Atomic Habits and all that stuff. If you make the best choice available, you will put yourself in a position to win it every single time. And I guess I wish I would have known that just earlier in life, just as soon as I was hitting the ground running as a 1.5-year-old and was able to walk. I don't know. I wish I would have had it as soon as possible. And then the next thing I wish I would have known is that I didn't write it down. I'm sure there's tons, man, but I guess I wish I just would have known that like life is much more simple than we make it out to be. You know what I mean? I think the very simple way to live a good life is to follow the golden rule, treat people how you want to be treated, right? And don't be a dick. Just don't be a dick. Just be nice, man. And give people, I think it's funny, the irony in the fact that we were kids, you know, think back to middle school, we watch somebody get off the bus and fall and trip into a puddle. You'd laugh for days. It'd be the joke of the month, really. And it's like we get older and we realize life's a lot harder than we actually probably realize as children, and we give people more grace, right?
Yeah.
You were to fall and fall into a puddle, I'd give you my jacket, right? So that you didn't have to wear that wet shirt all day. It's just, I wish we would have had, I wish I would have known the impact of that, I guess, earlier. So nevertheless, the big one is that, you know, every choice you make is going to have a consequence. So make the best choice possible.
Yeah, your life literally is you are where you are today because of the series of choices and decisions and actions that were made and taken in the last X number of years. You know, some people like to say 6 months, 6 years, whatever. I don't necessarily think there's a time frame on it, because you can make a decision 5 years ago that won't impact you for another 10.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? But no, that's
there's delayed
great.
responses to some of them. Yes, of course.
And I think I'm going to quote you on the don't be a dick.
Yeah. It's again, go back to how simple it is, but man, I just don't think people realize that the way you can come off to somebody sometimes is you just be nice, man. Just give people more grace, you know?
Yeah, I actually just talked about that on my last podcast. I did one on core values. And I was talking about the importance, like leaving an impact, and how your actions and things, your choices leave impacts. And I was like, you don't have to leave an impact in the sense of Jeff Bezos creating Amazon or Elon Musk going to Mars, but you would be surprised how much of an impact just being friendly and being nice has. And when many years ago, like 2011 or 12, I was working at Waffle House, and I was a bit of an asshole. I was arrogant. What 20-year-old, 19-year-old dude is not, you know? I was full of myself. I knew everything. You couldn't tell me anything. And I read this article for whatever reason, this guy, and again, like I'd said before, I don't know the validity behind what he said, but it was really profound to me, and I've applied it since. He said that he interviewed X number of people who had attempted suicide, but were not successful. And one of the questions he asked them, I think he said 500 people. I can't remember for sure, but I believe he said 500. One of the questions he asked people was, if there's one thing that would have stopped you from attempting suicide, what would it have been? And the consensus answer was just one person showing they care.
Yeah.
Just one person being nice. So from then on, I made a point to try to be as nice as possible to everyone I could.
Absolutely.
It's easier some days than others, you know, but I took heed of that, or I took notice of that, one, because I was in a dark spot, and it really was profound to me, because I had friends, but I wasn't really around people that were nice.
Right.
You know, so I was in a very dark spot at that point in my life too. And I'm like, there's some truth to this. So I started saying hey to people and holding doors open and telling people to have a good day and things like that. And now I'm like, although I'm not exactly a social butterfly, if I see, I will go to the cash register at Walmart where the person looks the most miserable. And I'll just try to provide a little bit of, and I don't know what's going on. They could be pissed about their job, or they could have lost a husband or a wife, or who knows, you know, but me just being like, hey, I hope you have a good day. You know, just making a little small talk, whatever, like that goes.
Eye contact and you know, it's not just have a good one. Hey man, I really appreciate you. I hope you have a great day. You know, like
smile,
that little thing
be
that costs you
sincere.
nothing
Yeah,
could be the reason why they don't drive off the bridge on the way home, quite frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell my wife all the time, one of the things that I admire most about her, and it's actually something that I try to apply it in my own life, is she is the most genuine and sincere, caring person I've ever met in my life. She will have, like, she'll compliment someone and I will feel the impact of her complimenting them. Like, seriously, we'll be at a gas station, somebody will have nails, and she'll be like, "Oh, I love your nails. They look great." And then they light up, "Thank you, I did them myself."
Yeah.
And I'm like, damn, I feel better that you complimented someone, because she's so sincere, But yeah, that, like you said, just being nice, that's huge. That's absolutely fundamental. And it makes you feel better too.
It does, man. And to kind of add on to that, when COVID happened, man, I became a lot more. I've never been one of the guys. There's a lot of guys we went to high school with, or just guys in general, that will never post, never like anything, but they're there on social media, right? And I've never been one of those guys. I've always, put something out there. I was posting about finance stuff since I was in college, but I became more active on liking people's posts or leaving comments saying great picture, right? Because when COVID happened, I think we were all in this weird state, but I feel like we just adding those couple of things just gives people hope, right? Because that's the only thing that's gonna solve fear, is the fact that we have hope in our minds, and just being, I don't know, interactive, man. It gives people, but there's a dark side to the dopamine you get from the likes on Facebook, right? But just the connections that you get are really the pure thing, so.
Sure. Absolutely. Very, very true. Very true. So yeah, you explained what you wish you would have learned or what you learned on your own, which you wish somebody would have taught you. But the next question would be, what is a piece of advice that someone did give you, that you did receive from someone, that has been most impactful in your life? Or what pieces of advice? It doesn't necessarily have to be just one.
I would say this may or may not, I don't think it's a piece of advice, but it was, and again, I'll say, working in the last 3 years in the professional world, I've noticed a clear distinction between people who grew up playing team sports like myself and people who didn't. And it's not a knock on anybody. It's just to say that people who grew up playing team sports are much easier to work with, in my opinion. They get the fact that there's a bigger picture here, that you're doing your part. And I just have a couple use cases that, aren't even worth going into, but just people who never played sports. They don't understand the bigger thing. They're selfish, that they're in their own world. But I say that because my football coach also used to say, the same sun that melts butter hardens clay, right? Mm-hmm. So you're going to be a hot winner or a hot loser, because it's going to be hot either way. And that's not advice. It's just one of those things where you're like, yeah, that's it, man. I need to just go. Like, just get up, and like the Nike "Just Do It" slogan, I never understood as a kid until I realized, like, no, you just literally need to do it. Yeah. You just need to just get up and go, man. And so I guess that's had a profound impact on me. And just, I don't know, man, I've been so blessed to have so many influential people that were good people, kind of just pour into me, whether they were doing it directly or indirectly, that there's so many going through my mind I can't even really pinpoint, So, I mean, it's just, I don't know. And you have your business partners, you have your teachers and all these people, but yeah, I mean, there's tons, man, but I'm drawing a blank at the moment.
No worries. No worries. Do you know who Art Williams is?
Yeah.
Yeah. The former old motivational speaker. He's passed on now. Have you heard his speech, "Just Do It"?
No.
Oh man, it is beautiful. It is the most basic motivational speech ever, but he spends like 5 minutes saying the same thing. He's like, when this happens and you know what you got to do, just do it.
Yeah.
And then when this happens, you just do it and do it and do it. And guess what? You do it again, so it's,
I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's basic, but it's I've learned that some of the most profound lessons I've learned in life have been the most simplistic.
That's kind of, I don't want to single I don't want to put a title on this podcast episode, but that's kind of what we've been talking about, is things are a lot more simple than we make them out to be. Right. Sure. And it's like, it's very, I think we just put far more thought, far too much, right? Yeah. When you get out of bed, or let's say you're a runner, right? You've been running, and good on you, by the way, because I hate cardio, and I'm sure you do too. But the idea there,
it's grown on me.
Of course it has, because once you get into the discipline, once you create that discipline, that habit of doing it, right? It's not an option, right? Because people are going to start off, especially when you do a diet program or you do this or that, you're going to be motivated early on, but that motivation is going to run out, man. And the only way you're going to be able to sustain that is by building in discipline and having that discipline to carry you forward.
Absolutely.
And so, I guess to your point, man, things are just much more simple than they really, again, we just overthink everything, man. And we put so much time and attention into what could happen. And so I got to go. When I got some advice that just came to me, a woman once told me, she said, the past, the past is regret and the future is anxiety and the present is Zen. So live in the moment. Right. And so, because the Stoics said that too, it's just one of those things where it's like, that's easier said than done. But when you really think about it, it's like, why even think about situations that have not occurred yet? Why think about that, right? Why think that, your health could decline or whatever in the past, when you think about things that you can't change, don't think about that. Think about the here and now, appreciate what you got,
Yeah. And like, because of the society we live in now, especially like the access to information and seeing
Certainly.
others and all of that, that's a big problem, because it was probably a hell of a lot easier to live in the moment when you had to get up in the morning and plow the fields.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, but now it's like, well, let me see what my favorite influencers are doing and what new information is available that I can try to fix my life with. Like, I got stuck in that. I became addicted to learning.
Yeah.
Like, but not in a good sense.
That's an aha moment, by the way.
Yeah.
I've met people recently, like friends of mine, that I think it might come with maturity, but people who like a guy read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it just changed everything for him. It's just like, it's funny how we as human beings, I guess, we get older, and it's an aha moment where it's like, I am addicted to bettering myself and learning how to better myself. Yeah, it's a breakthrough moment.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll go back to running and then I'll touch back on this. I hated running. I despised it, but I knew it was a necessary evil. It was sometimes you gotta, go work the midnight shift to get what you need accomplished. Sometimes you gotta sacrifice. So I was like, I'm tired of being obese. I'm tired of being out of shape. I'm tired of, I'm like, when my wife told me she was pregnant, I was 50 pounds heavier than I am now. I was eating like crap. I was not making good health decisions. I was drinking frequently, not like alcoholic or drunk drinking, but a couple glasses of wine a night, things like that. I was living a decent life, but my health choices were not that good. And it dawned on me, because I talk to people all the time about stress and the importance of not being unhealthy, and like talking about the top or 10 of the leading causes of death being stress related. And I'm like, I'm sitting here, my wife just told me she's pregnant, and I'm making decisions every day that are reducing the amount of time I'm going to get to spend with my child. Yeah. And I felt like the biggest piece of trash on the earth, because I'm like, I'm robbing my child of time with her father. And she's not even developed yet. My wife didn't even have a belly when I was coming to these revelations. So I started running, but then there was something switched, and I realized, like, if I wasn't planning on running for the day, but I was in a particular mood, or I couldn't focus, or whatever it may be, I go run a couple miles and I'd feel way better.
Just do it.
Yeah, just do it. Exactly. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We do tend to over complicate things in society and in general. And I think it's because we're told that it's not that simple, or it's implied that it's not that simple, because what people don't realize is it's simple, but it might not be easy.
Oh, you just nailed it. That's exactly what it is. Like, simple people get easy those two things misconstrued. They think that they're synonymous. They're not. Absolutely. Simple and easy are not. Yeah. So.
That's one of the things you referenced your old football coach. Who was your coach, by the way? Was it Coach Pollard?
Yeah.
I went to Tate, so I didn't have the quite the great experience with the football program. Although my freshman team was undefeated and we beat the dog piss out of everyone. And I use the term "we" lightly, because I was second string everything. But I got to play a lot because we were just that good. So the second half, I was a second half starter.
There you go.
But anyways, one of the things that Coach Rigby said was he was talking about, the things we do are simple, but they're not easy, because if they were easy, everyone that went to this school would be out here on this practice field.
I think that's like a ubiquitous quote that all football coaches say. Because that's what Coach Pollard would say to us. I mean, he's like, boys, if this was easy, everybody would be out here, because everybody wants to wear the jersey on Friday. Everybody wants to wear that jersey at school.
Almost verbatim. Yeah. I think there's like a high school football coach class they have to take. But yeah, it's when you can realize that just by there's a lot of information out there, but most of the information overcomplicates things.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the reasons I
started. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I started the podcast, is because I wanted to provide simplistic information, simplistic in a good way, information that can help people improve the quality of their life.
Right.
Because if you like, I can go into a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset and the psychology of success. Sure, I'll have conversations with the best of them and I'll hold my own. But at the end of the day, you have to take action to change your belief, because your mood follows your actions.
Yep.
And what that means basically is, if let's say I wanted to improve my health, so I started running. And I hated running for months. I despised it, but then I saw myself getting better and I started craving it. So the mood, my thoughts on running changed after I took the actions. Yeah. I don't think there's anyone who's successful that was like, I am this person. Like Tony Robbins probably didn't start out and say he's going to be the most successful life strategist or whatever the hell he calls himself nowadays, because life coach is overused. He changed it up. He's a life and business strategist now. But he didn't start out by saying, I'm going to have a net worth of $500 million doing this. He started out by saying, I'm going to take the actions and I have faith, so excuse me, the mood follows your actions.
Absolutely.
And the more simplistic you can make your actions, the easier it is to accomplish them. So
yeah, and I guess to the opposite of that is like, going to get a meal at McDonald's because it's easy, right? I don't know that anybody eats McDonald's and feels good about it afterwards, right? But that's the thing, is that like, you literally, from a negative standpoint, like your mood does follow the action, right? Because you knew you made a bad choice, but sometimes it's a good choice because it's convenient and it's quick. But nevertheless, it's like, by putting yourself in that situation, which by the way, growth and comfort could never coexist, right? So you have to go through struggle. You have, quite literally, you have to fail to learn anything. So yeah, man. And good on you, man, getting into shape like that, because on several occasions I've gotten into cardio shape, because my main thing now is biking. I like to go to spin class. Sure. And I think it's because I like the high energy. I'm a high energy kind of guy. Yeah. I like the high energy of spin classes, because in my own mind, when I'm running on a treadmill on the ground, I'm asking myself why I'm running over and over and over. Like, I absolutely cannot stand the idea of just running. And so the biking, though, with people, I'm feeling the energy from everybody. I say that to say, once you get into the habit, or you see the slightest little result, or where something was hard at one point, it's now like, oh, dang, this feels a lot easier. I'm not nearly as winded after, the workout or whatever. I don't feel like I'm going to roll over and die,
Right, exactly.
So, exactly. And then your body starts to kind of, you wake up with more energy. You have a longer day because you're being productive. And a lot of things just start to fall in place, man. But it's that breakthrough, that day in the gym where you're like, that cut wasn't there before. Where that cut,
do a nice workout. You walk by a mirror and you're like, oh, my chest. What's going on up here? Nice. Yeah, for sure. So I'll ask one last question and we can kind of go from there. I guess it's not a two-part question. So you probably already answered this in the last 30 minutes of us talking about mindset and things like that. Sure. But what are 4 principles that you use in your life that you think would be helpful for others to use in their lives?
I did talk about the same sun that melts butter hardens clay. The other analogy that they use is the same boiled water that hardens the egg, softens the potato. Embrace the suck, man. Because it's going to be there. You just have to face it. The other thing I literally just said was growth and comfort cannot coexist. And I think the moment you realize that, the moment that you realize your 9 to 5 is paying the bills and that you're a slave to the dollar in that realm, and you got to get uncomfortable in the fact that you're starting a side business, right? You're going out on, when I went out, when I started in this business, I was so used to having a steady stream of income from a paycheck, a salary, or it was hourly or whatever it was. This is strictly commission-based work, and that will change everything for you once you start to get the ball rolling, because it's a boulder you're pushing uphill and is incredibly tough. But once you get into it, it is a phenomenally rewarding career. But I say that to say you have to make yourself uncomfortable to grow. It's just the reality of the fact. The other one, and you may or may not have seen this meme that goes around of Elon Musk where he says, work like hell. I think there's this misconception out there, especially amongst the younger folks, that you're not supposed to, like, when I see people say, why did we choose taxes and credit scores over eating fruit and floating in the ocean, right? Why did civilization take this turn for what it did? And my thought is, how presumptuous of you to assume that you were not running from being something's meal the entirety of your existence, right?
Right.
If you weren't producing in the village, they were either going to kill you or exile you, and you would have been killed, because nobody was floating in the ocean eating fruit. And if they were, it was 3 people that were controlled the continents, right? Or whatever it was. And so the fact that you have a 40-hour work week, right? And quite frankly, when you take the 168 hours that are actually in a week, that's a pretty good deal. And I don't think people want to consider that, where they're like, oh, what do you mean I only get 8 hours a day and I only have 48 hours off? Like, I don't know. That frustrates me, because I don't think people, it's kind of disrespectful to the hundreds of billions, if not trillions, of people that have walked this earth to get us to this very comfortable portion of life. And it kind of goes back to the problems that we have in society today. We are no longer pursuing meals on foot while not trying to be a meal, right? We're no longer in it. So we argue with each other. Race becomes a problem, right? Gender becomes a problem. See, social problems arise when we don't go through struggle, when we don't have something to struggle, right? And so the last thing is a Ray Dalio thing. It's to be radically open-minded, right? To the point where you almost are intensely worried about being wrong. Like, when you say something, you should almost always be like, but I don't know for sure. Like, you need to be open-minded in the sense that you don't. Have you come across that?
Yes, but I'll let you finish, but I have something that I say as like a disclaimer, but go ahead.
And so when I say drop the ego, there are things that are facts. Like, it's a fact that, the Roth IRA is going to produce after-tax income. So you can say that and it be certain, but your opinion should never be set in stone. Just my belief, I don't know. I'm one of the most open-minded individuals you could possibly be, just because I know how ignorant I am to everything but what I know. I'm a subject matter expert. It's finance. Everything else out there, I'm gonna tell you, but I don't know. That's my follow-up to everything. So
that's great. Yeah, I think one the disclaimer I was talking about when I talk to people about, not clients necessarily, because it would probably be a little concerning for someone who's paying me to help them in life for me to say this, but when I talk about philosophical things or even esoteric things, I would end. I don't do it so much anymore. Well, unfortunately, I don't really have that many opportunities to have those types of conversations now, because I don't know too many people out here. But I would always end by saying, but I could be wrong, because they're opinions. Philosophy is a matter of opinion in just about every case. The spirituality and the esoteric things like that, that's a matter of opinion.
Right.
So for me to be so matter of fact about something that there's no tangible proof of, is a naive and foolish thing to do. And I like what Joe Rogan says he's like, I'm not married to my ideas. If you present information to me that will make me change my mind, okay.
It happens all the time for me.
Oh, for sure.
If you put the facts in front of me, right? If you present an argument to me and I'm like, actually, that makes sense. And it doesn't take college to do that, but that is the echo chamber that college really is the diverse pot of ideas that you're like, wait a minute, hold on, wait a minute. What did you just say? And immediately going through college, you're like, no, you're wrong, man. And then once you have those open discourses, like, whoa, I didn't even look at it that way.
Because it's something that is one of the most underappreciated life skills, under-recognized life skills, is just having that ability, like you said, to, one, acknowledge the fact that you're possibly wrong.
Yeah.
Two, accepting it when facts are presented to you, removing your ego and saying, okay. And to me, it's almost like, while it is egotistical to refute fact that doesn't prove you right, to me, it's like, it is a sign of a healthy ego, because to me, like, my ego leads me to want to be better and to learn more.
Right.
And if you present something to me that makes me develop a new opinion or change my mind, like that's feeding my ego, because now I have even better information to go with.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that I think I got to get out of the habit of thinking that things are commonplace for people to know. But the idea that, goodness gracious, I got to stop these sidebars because I lose my train of thought.
No worries.
Oh, goodness. It was something good too, man. Nevertheless, what I was going to say about the college thing was that, I saw this, I don't know, it was in a textbook or in a book I read, but this professor is standing up in the front of the class, and he holds up a book, and he asks the class what color the book is. The class says it's black. He says, no, it's red. They say, no, it's black. And he's like, no, it's red. And then he turns the book and it's red on his side. And in that situation, you're like, that perspective is the leading cause of war. It's the leading cause of everything. What I was going to say was, there's levels to opinions, man. Like a moral belief is an opinion, right? You should be strong in your moral beliefs, right? But you should also be open to understand, you don't have to necessarily respect it, right? But you have to understand that people have difference of belief because of their upbringing, their environment they were raised in. Like, it's just it's crazy that people will dismiss that so confidently, like they are right or something because their granddaddy and their daddy said it. It's law. Like, what? Like, that's crazy to me, man. So
yeah, absolutely. And that is partly due to because their granddaddy and their daddy saying it was law to them.
Yeah, literally. Yeah.
Exactly. If you disagreed with them, they'd beat the hell out of you, So like, that's one of the most important things that I hope people take away from this, apart from life can be a lot more simple than we make it, is that it's imperative to have that open mind and willingness to have that open dialogue with people. Because like Jordan Peterson says, have a conversation with someone with the understanding or with the belief that they may know something you don't.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And I subscribe to the notion that nobody's stupid. I have stopped calling people stupid because, and even when I'm driving down the road and someone cuts me off, I just remove it from my vocabulary because somebody knows something you don't know, bro. They either know how to change that, transmission that we were talking about earlier, right? I don't know how to do that, right? That makes them smarter than me in that category, right? They know how to groom a cat. I don't know how to groom a cat. Right. That makes them smarter than me in that category. So everybody has something to provide. You just have to unlock it or let them unlock it, right? And I think that goes back to just being a nice person and being communal, man. So I like
that. I like that a lot. Remove stupid from your vocabulary.
I guess it sounds a little silly to say that, but it really is one of those things where when you have that in your mind that, oh no, that's stupid, you immediately dismissed any idea of one, a relationship probably, but two, the ability to grow, the ability to offer yourself a better outlook on something. I would like to add, and this is, going back to some point in the conversation when you asked me about something I wish I knew earlier in life. And I think a lot of our parents probably said this, but junk in, junk out, right? Like, people you hang out with, but the better one, the more mature one I would say is that you are the average of the 5 closest friends that you have, right? The 5 closest people to you. And I said this, I think before we started recording, but last time I was talking to a friend, a pilot, actually, a great guy. And I was telling him, I was like, the funny thing about like cliches is that they're when they're not relevant to your current situation, they're cliche. You're like, oh yeah, it's cliche. Yeah. But then when they're relevant, it's like a revelation. You're like, oh my God. Like, and so my mom always told me junk in, junk out. But when it finally clicked, I was like, no, literally, like the people I communicate with daily, like my business partner, my best friend, the female companion I am the average of those 5 people because that's who I give my time to. And I literally take what they give me, whether it's their lingo, their thought processes, the way they move, the way they operate. You have to understand that people in your life, you have to remove the negative, man. It goes back to that consequences thing, man. Find the good that's out there and just compound the hell out of that, man. Make it everything in your circle as best as it can be to progress forward. But I will say too, Travis, I don't think a lot of people have that mindset, that process wired into their brain. Because some people, and type A, type B personality is something that I take very seriously. I'm type A++. But I say that to say, my older sister, man, she is nothing like me at all, right? She is not motivated by deadlines, right? She's not, conscious of her, not necessarily social status, but just the way people perceive her. Right? I think growing up, people would say, you shouldn't care what people think. Well, no, actually you should, because it's kind of selfish if you don't, to be quite honest with you. Like, if you stink because you didn't put deodorant on, you need to put deodorant on, man. Like you have a societal responsibility. You know what I'm saying? There's a social responsibility to things. And so anyways, I say all that to say, I think some people are just wired certain ways, and we should give grace to them in that regard too, you know?
Absolutely. And I agree with you. I think that's probably a great spot to wrap it up.
Absolutely.
If you don't mind, if anyone would like to connect with you, if you want to give them your social information, your social medias and everything, that way they can connect with you if they would like.
I'm trying to remember what they are. So let me go to Facebook right quick to try to get the link. I would tell them I'm the big guy in the suit and my name is Grant Murphy. But let me make sure I can get this, because much like yourself, Travis, I mean, with this being your outlet, you know, to share your experience or this to be your voice, Facebook is my voice. I know you know this, and probably some of the people that will watch this will know this if they're following me, but that's where I share my financial information with the same purpose you do. It's information I don't think most people know, and they need to know, right? Those that are willing to give it the time to learn. So I'm on my page right now. It is the facebook.com/LG Murphy 55. That's my
LG Murphy 55. Okay.
That's it, man.
Good deal.
So,
and you said the big guy in the suit.
That's it, man. Big guy in the suit. Listen, Travis, I got to thank you again, man, for bringing me on. And I know we talked about earlier, like we're two long-winded individuals, and I think we exhausted the wind out of this. But I have had
2 hours.
fun.
Yeah,
2
absolutely, man. Yeah.
2 hours?
2 hours. We started a little after noon on my time, and it's 2:06 now.
Oh my goodness.
Time flies when you're having fun, man. And I appreciate you coming on. We'll have to do it again for sure. But yeah, man, thank you so much. It's been great. And you taught me a lot, and I hope people that hear it really learn from it and grow. So I'll go ahead and end the recording and everything. We'll go from there. All right.
All right, buddy. Sounds good.
All right. Take care.
Yes, sir.
All right, guys. That was a great conversation that I just had with my friend Grant Murphy. I hope you guys found value in it and enjoyed it. As always, I do thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to my podcast, review my podcast. It's greatly appreciated. Until next time, you guys take care.